how we've all gotten together and worked out quite a production.
Of the Twilight Zone.
All right, class, we're going to call the roll.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to WBNS TV, a family tradition for 50 years. I'm Dave Kaler. As a way of celebrating our 50 years of broadcasting here in Central Ohio, we have decided to look back at some of the people who have made 10 TV what it is today. Now, obviously, in an hour, we can't possibly mention all of the people and all of the shows that you have grown up with. So we have chosen just a few, those people who we're still most often asked about. And we start off with one of the world's best-known comic talents, a man who inspired an entire generation of comedians. And you know what? He got his start right here at 10 TV.
It was the fall of 1950. 10 TV, like the medium of television itself, was in its infancy. The station had barely been on the air a year when a young man from Dayton named Jonathan Winters was hired as one of the station's multi-purpose announcers.
It took me about 2-3 weeks to finally see what we could do together. And we developed a half-hour show every night called Winter's Wonderland.
Though the show itself consisted only of Winters, a desk, and a fishbowl, his improvisational skills were an instant hit with both viewers and his co-workers.
He would be all of these characters, and of course what everybody loved was the fact that sometimes he would answer the phone. And he would send people through several different areas, starting out with the person who answered the phone, a little higher executive level, and finally the president of the company would be talking to this person, and oh my goodness, well I didn't expect to talk to the president of the company. And yes sir, well we believe in taking care of our customers.
He loved to get on the phone, switchboard, especially when some drunks would call. And your lighting isn't very good there, you know, BNS. We want to talk to the lighting director? Just a minute, please, and we'd put him on. And he'd hang this guy, hook him, and reel him in with all the lighting expertise, the jibber jabber, and the guy would hang up thinking, my, what a place the guy really talks to you, lighting people.
So he was always hilarious, but he didn't have routines as such. He just simply made it up.
He was great fun to be around, and exhausting at the same time.
Johnny was one of the funniest men I ever got to know. And I always felt bad because everything he did on network TV never hit. And I couldn't understand what was wrong. You know, they evidently couldn't capture him by the writing or what. But Johnny was in the hallway, man, he'll kill you dead.
Winters wasn't the only early 10 TV star to take his act before a national audience. From its very beginning, 10 TV has served as a place where young, fresh talent can hone their skills and grow professionally. And that was the case with early sportscaster and future Baseball Hall of Fame broadcaster, Jack Buck.
Jack Buck was a great guy, a wonderful announcer. You heard this story evidently, or you wouldn't ask about it?
The story I can think of is that he was a coach of our baseball team, our softball team. And he'd book, you know, the teams. And we used to play the mental hospital here once a year, and it was a big deal because these patients would come out and warm up, and we'd warm up. We could never beat them. We tried year after year to beat them, and Buck played first base, and he would just berate us. And he used to bring the story up all the time that we were not even good enough to beat patients, you know, in a hospital.
Buck was only at 10 TV for about a year, soon departing to follow a path toward baseball immortality as the longtime voice of the St. Louis Cardinals. Another popular sports alum of WBNS is Gary Radnich, whose humor was as much a part of his sportscasts as scores and highlights.
And Gary's success here at Channel 10 was the fact that he knew how to keep the non-sports person interested in sports. So he would do all kinds of crazy things, and I think that just lightened up the whole news set. Because we're pretty stodgy in the early 80s, and then when Gary came, he lightened everybody up.
Oh, no, this is 2 in 1 shot. Arch, I tell you what, is there anybody that can sound like Archie? Get on in the control room and pretend it's Archie.
Now it's time for Gary Radnich and Tonight's Sports.
How come I'm buried in the show? It's almost over. In fact, I was walking out here and my...
it was my idea.
Was it yours?
Yeah.
My bodyguard, Gail White, said, wait a minute, don't go out there. You're not Vanna White. Of one of the area's top cheerleading squads. I'm going down. Huh? You see what time it is?
Yeah, Wheel of Fortune. Right, yeah, I know.
Tell
Hurry up or else you're going to run into the computer. Let's go.
I'm not afraid of the computer. I don't know about you, but Arch, is that you? On the other end of this story, we've got a Kerry Ross cheerleader. I'll tell you what, you guys want to go to the Kerry Ross cheerleading package? There's an old thing. There's only one thing wrong with bombing once.
Bombing twice.
That's the only thing worse.
So he just had a rapport going with all of us, actually. I think we've all seen the scene where he kisses me, or almost.
You're not bad. But one lady from Worthington said, will you please give Joe Holbrook a hug and a kiss? I'll give you 50% of that, my dear. All right. What the heck is it? The hair? Why does everybody love Joe? All right, there he is. That's enough. Boy, if I could hang out with Joe all the time, I wouldn't have to answer one letter. Okay. There you go for you. Nice lady in Worthington. That's enough. No kiss. Coming up later.
I agree.
Another person who got his start on 10 TV is the Columbus Zoo's Jack Hanna.
We started that show here called Hannah's Ark. And he'd come back from the zoo with his daughter, who was absolutely fabulous on the air. And I bought a library called Animal World and just got the sound, the picture, and the narration we cut out. And we used those as basic when he said, now here's an elephant, and we go to this stuff. Okay? Ran for about 4 or 5 years. Took it off the air, and everybody screamed, you know. I got stuck with the phrase, well, they don't have enough animals at the zoo, meaning I don't have the film to support them. Well, I got really nailed on that. In the meantime, he got a big national contract and went all the way to big time.
In the mid-1960s, one man reversed the trend, coming to 10 TV after he was already known by millions of people across America.
Portrait of a frightened man, Mr. Robert Wilson. Mr. Wilson has just been discharged from a sanitarium. Tonight, he's traveling all the way to his appointed destination, which, contrary to Mr. Wilson's plan, happens to be in the darkest corner of the Twilight Zone.
Still teaching at nearby Antioch College while the Twilight Zone was at its height, Rod Serling had a chance encounter with WBNS programming director John Haldy.
I kept thinking, yeah, but that guy is that close. It'd be interesting to maybe have him front a movie like we did with Woody later, because he knows everything that's going on out there, and I have like 2,000 films here that maybe we can utilize better with somebody like Serling fronting it. Well, he kind of liked the idea, and so he said, okay, and I said, well, who's going to write him?
Our guest, of course, is Rod Serling, one of the, and forgive me, Rob, but one of the greatest writers of all time.
And he looked and he says, you're asking me who's going to write the copy? I said, oh yeah, I suppose you will. Very good, John. He went ding, ding, ding. Good.
Serling wouldn't accept money for his weekly movie role. Instead, he simply asked for a car to be furnished each summer to his country home in New York. Another man would eventually succeed Serling as the host of late-night movies on 10 TV. And during his tenure, he would roll out an unheard-of 6,000 consecutive shows without a rerun.
It's Saturday night, time to open once again Fritz the Night Owl's bedtime storybook. And another subtle, unobtrusive entrance by your voice of the night, Fritz the Night Owl. Hey, tonight!
Fritz came in because he was over at radio and had this great big voice, you know. And he wrote good copy, too. So we got him. And we put him in the announce booth, but never showed his face for about 2 years, okay? And people are saying, who the heck is Fritz the Night Owl? Well, night owls are to be heard, not seen. You know, that was our line. And so the curiosity got such that we finally got some glasses for him from Elton John's guy. Big glasses, and our art department put little horns on the side, and here he is.
It's Thursday night. You've climbed the 10 TV broadcast tower where you meet your voice of the night, Fritz the Night Owl.
Won a tremendous amount of Emmys and awards for his production. Probably one of the first guys in this station that really was production oriented in terms of how he introed and did the breaks in his movies that he did at night.
We got a kid in here who knew all about electronics and superimposing him. He would fly, would do all sorts of tricks that we couldn't do with the equipment that we had at one time. Very popular guy.
For the record, the Night Owl's real name, Fritz Perenboom. When we come back, we'll shift our focus to what might have been 10 TV's most popular program ever, as we unspool the only remaining episode of Lucy's Toy Shop.
The year was 1955, and one of the most popular shows in 10 TV history was about to be unveiled. Hi, I'm Angela Pace. As a little girl here in Central Ohio, I remember growing up with the show that we're about to tell you about. From Stanley Mouse to Mr. Tree, every morning began in the toy shop.
Hi, boys and girls. How are you? Well, I'm all set today for the circus.
A signature of the Young 10 TV was its early morning children's show. At first hosted by Aunt Fran Norris, and then by Betty Jones. TV Kindergarten exploded in popularity when Jones passed the torch to a new host in 1955.
In came her assistant, Lucy, who was an ex-dancer out of Chicago and a very bright lady who could write music, etc.
I worked with John Haldy in the beginning because he's the one that helped me create the show. We decided what we were going to call it, and I thought, well, I don't want to do another kindergarten. Why don't we make it a toy shop? And I said we could call it Lucy's Toy Shop.
Incredibly, with a myriad of puppets and characters on the show, there was really only one other main collaborator with Lucy, and that was Fritz Peerenboom's college roommate, Chuck White. Originally hired into an off-camera position in the news department, White's talents made him a natural for Lucy's Toy Shop.
He was a good singer, too. He played the guitar. Great talent and a good voice, and he would sing songs. Then the show really became highly popular.
Chuck White, of course, was the beginning with the puppets. He did the giraffe, Mr. Tree, Pierre, and any other puppet that we came up with, you know. And if we had, say, a slow time when we didn't know what to do the next day, well, create another puppet because that becomes another character. And Chuck was so adept at making his voice kind of associate with the character.
'Cause they're waiting now for us to leave.
Oh, yes.
They're hiding something up their sleeve. A plan to surely make us grieve. But stop, we'll hide here in the shop. Oh, yes.
I said, let's come up with a character named Pierre Francois. He would be as a French poodle, and he would do the birthday cake for the kids. And so Lucy, being as talented as she was, went right home that same day, cut the character out, and came up with the puppet. Now, this is a replica. This is a child's replica of Pierre.
Pierre, you didn't cover up your eyes.
I didn't cover. I was trying to see who was covering their eyes. All right, I covered my eyes.
I wish I had a birthday cake. I wish I had a birthday cake. I wish I had a birthday cake right here in the toy shop. There it is.
Right there,
And don't forget to keep your eyes on the cake, okay?
No. All right.
And if any of you see Pierre taking his eyes off the cake, don't forget to tell me, will you?
Wait.
That's right,
Yeah,
because
what's the
the
surprise
cake disappears.
Oh.
Pierre, look. See, every time he takes his eyes away, the cake disappears.
Oh.
Now watch the cake.
I watched the cake for
Here
you.
we go.
Hey, what's the surprise did you tell me? Oh.
When we had kids in the audience, the kids would yell and scream when the birthday cake would disappear. And the kids at home were sitting at home. They'd say, "Oh, the Pierre, the cake is moving."
It was more or less aimed at having the children participate actively at home, not sit there and watch a TV show.
While many of the characters in the toy shop were popular with the children at home, the one that was the most memorable wasn't necessarily the character with the biggest part.
This was Dragon, and Dragon would he talked like this. He always got into trouble. Every day he'd get into trouble. I got to pull Dragon's head back there a little bit. But Dragon and Pierre were actually, and Stanley Mouse and George were the three probably most popular characters on the show. But interestingly enough, everyone that I talk to now who is 30 years old or older who watch Lucy's Toy Shop remember one character and one character alone, and that stands out in their mind very much, and that's Mr. Tree.
I loved Mr. Tree, and I can still remember, "Wake up, Mr. Tree, we're very glad to see you. Wake up, Mr. Tree, it's daytime, can't you see?" And then he would open his eyes, and my sisters would go, "Oh, wow, we woke him up, hey, cool."
He had a very small segment in the show, but because of his size and because he was a talking tree, he would give the time, the date, and the weather, what the weather was going to be like. And all the kids identified with that, and the adults now who watch it.
Lucy's Toy Shop was a fixture on 10 TV for an incredible 17 years. leaving its cast with as many memories as its young viewers.
It was all fun. And that it was. I mean, really fun.
You know what? We're going to have to say goodbye now. So we'll see you tomorrow, boys and girls. Don't forget to keep laughing, just like Mr. Happy, okay? Bye-bye.
This has been Lucy's Toy Shop. Lucy and all her puppet friends will be back tomorrow at this same time. Join her then, won't you?
She was probably the #1 personality in the city until Flippo came in.
Later, 50 years of 10 TV Eyewitness News. But when we come back, the return of the King of the Clowns.
And now, here's Flippo.
He was a singer, he was a saxophonist, and he was funny. Those were the talents that caught the attention of 10 TV back in the early 1950s. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrea Camburn. Bob Marvin's career at WBNS would cover a quarter of a century, making him one of Central Ohio's most recognizable figures. Not necessarily as Bob Marvin, but as the King of the Clowns.
Well, I was at the Neal House Hotel first, playing saxophone and singing with a band. And then they were just putting together Channel 10 at the time. And some executives were seated at a table, and they heard me sing. And in spite of that, they invited me over for a drink. They said, would you be interested in being on TV? And I said, what's that? And so they said, you know, it was the early days. And that's why we did a show called The Early Show. Although that was later. So I said, yeah, well, will you come and audition? I said, sure. And so we set up an audition time, and I had a free drink. And then I went and auditioned. They said, we'd like to hire you, but I had a mustache at the time. And that was before facial hair was fashionable. See, I was a musician, man. We were ahead of everything. So they said, we'd like you to be on the show. It's a morning show, Homemaker's Hobnob. And but we'd like for you to shave off the mustache. I said, hey, no problem, you know. It's a gig. You gotta make some adjustments for a gig. So I did, and they bought my act, and I started singing here every morning, doing comedy and singing.
From Homemaker's Hobnob in 1950 to a show called Take 10 to a variety of game shows, Marvin quickly became one of 10 TV's best utility players, entertaining the other announcers as well as the 10 TV audience at home.
Oh, he was great. He like Jonathan Winters, entertained us. He would start his warm-up in the afternoon, cracking jokes, and he was just hilarious and just a great guy to work with.
He always had a fast comeback for everything that you say.
Ad-libs beautifully, you know, and kind of lead you into various directions. So you have to maybe think a little bit ahead of him to maybe catch him up on something too. And that was kind of the fun part.
It was really quite funny because every day was filled with some humorous antic that he would do.
In our days of general purpose announcers, we all had to come on to the show and do commercials. Well, it was very difficult to ever get through a straight commercial when Flippo was there. I was doing a commercial one time for a finance company, and all of a sudden I just sort of glanced out of the corner of my eye. He had crawled down on the floor, came by and grabbed my leg and was shaking my leg back and forth while I was trying to do the commercial. I never made it.
For 2 years, Marvin handled every job and show that was put in front of him. But in 1952, the signature role that would keep him in the public eye for decades almost eluded him.
Ward Baking Company came along and wanted a clown show on Saturday. So the station got talent together and said, has anybody here ever done any clowning? And I'm going, yeah, in the halls of my John Adams High School in Cleveland, you know, that's where I did all my clowning. And then they said, well, has anybody here, any of you guys had experience with makeup? And I said, I did, but it was just on Saturday nights, and then they cleaned up that part of town. So they assigned a director and a producer to me, and then they brought in a real clown from Dayton, the guy that had been working as a clown. And we rehearsed and we rehearsed and we rehearsed.
And he won that audition. Okay. He beat a real clown, in fact, that was brought in, and who got timid about the camera, and he only had one routine. He worked for Ringling, big time.
And that afternoon they called the clown's motel, the real guy, you know, the experienced clown. I said, give me Charlie's room. And I said, I'm sorry, Charlie checked out. Yeah. They said, Charlie did what?
Man, before he even really auditioned, he packed up his stuff and left.
And that's how it happened. They bought the show, they bought the act, they bought the clown. And then we wrote a theme song for Flippo. So I'm Flippo the clown, hello, 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 I wear the crown, king of the circus clowns. And while it's going, I'm juggling 3 balls. I finally learned how to juggle. I'm such a clever elf. I even fool myself. I'm Flippo, the king of the clowns. Aye, kids. Boy, is this taking me back. I'm getting old. Am I wrinkling up as I sit here?
So Flippo took that show, and I think he ran for 26 weeks. In the meantime, the movies that we've had for the Wrangler, okay, from 4 to 6 or 4:30 to 6, started to run out. And we put Flippo in there as the early show with cartoons. And then his reputation went from the Popeye to the Warner Brothers to Monpaw Kettle to Tarzan, and then we opened it up to 4 o'clock, and then he went with really top drawer movies from 4 to 6 o'clock.
It is time for the early show. Something familiar, something peculiar, something for everyone on movie today. Something appealing, something appalling, something for everyone on movie. Hey, hey! It may be John Wayne to give you a pain. Never a frown, for we've got a crown for something impulsive, something repulsive, something to take your cares away. Just try to find it, you'll always find it, a movie here today.
I can remember being a little girl and watching Flippo the Clown. My grandmother would sit us down, my sisters and myself, down in front of the TV and say, watch Flippo. And we would watch Flippo, and we thought Flippo was our babysitter and our best friend. And Flippo ran cartoons, and Flippo had games, and Flippo was just an absolute nut. I know now that Flippo's humor was actually for adults. It wasn't for little kids. But we laughed at him anyway because we thought he was hysterical. And at the end of every program, he would say, okay, you kids, be good and don't fight. And my grandmother would be in the kitchen and she'd yell out, you hear that? Don't fight, don't fight. So Flippo, I guess, was kind of our babysitter, and to a certain extent, I guess, our role model too.
Flippo was a type of guy that, whether he was on the air or off the air, whether he was in uniform or his outfit or not, you walked around here laughing all the time. That was the neat thing about the early days of TV with Flippo around. You laughed a lot.
There was a time in the 70s maybe when we all had the bouffant haircuts, and my hair had just turned from brown to gray. Well, of course, Flippo the Clown started the idea that I wore a wig. And he came into the studio one day and he said, it's windy outside. And the floor crew always yelled, how windy was it? He said, I don't know, but I saw Joe Holbrook out on the driveway chasing his hair.
More than 2 decades have passed since Bob Marvin left 10 TV's airwaves. But his trademark voice and face, though now without the makeup, are still recognized by Central Ohioans.
I get a lot of that today. A lot of people have said to me, why don't you go to Florida, man? Relax, play golf. That's right. I said, hey, I go to Florida. I'm just another fat guy, a tourist, a face in the crowd. I'm in Columbus, and my car says Flippo on the, I got 2 cars. One of them says on the license plate Flippo, and the other one's a Geo with, all painted up with Flippo all over it, and my kisser on the hood, you know, a big thing. As everywhere I go, everybody knows who I am. If they don't, all I have to do is look at the car. And, you know, the red carpet rolls out, and I have a good time. So I don't think I'll ever leave Columbus, except by box.
When we come back, 10 TV Eyewitness News turns 50. And still to come, a chat with Central Ohio's favorite anchor.
The Cold War Kent State, Blizzards, Buckeyes, and local heroes heading to the stars. These are just some of the millions of stories that 10 TV Eyewitness News has covered over the last 50 years. Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Hogan. Rather than looking back at the stories, we want to take a few minutes to look back at some of the people who brought them to you. Just a few of the people who have made 10 TV Eyewitness News Central Ohio's most trusted news source.
It was October 5th, 1949, and a man named Bill Pepper stepped up to a microphone and signed on WBNS 10 TV. Pepper would go on to become one of the most trusted people ever to work at 10 TV Eyewitness News. Beginning as the station's main announcer, he not only handled news duties, but also had a hand in bringing in new talent.
Well, he was totally responsible for my career. Bill was a very, very capable newsman.
Meanwhile, Governor Rhodes said that every state worker...
He was just an excellent, well-spoken, good person. And as a chief announcer, he was our original boss. He was very helpful. In fact, he was so helpful that he occasionally would lend us $5 when we got short.
In those early days, each announcer was expected to carry out a variety of different duties. And whether it was anchoring a newscast, hosting a talk show, or reading a commercial, one of the early favorites was a man named Roy Briscoe, who would bring Central Ohioans their news for 4 decades.
WBNS TV presents Roy Briscoe with the news. Good evening. The FBI today arrested 25-year-old Morris E. Sutton of Columbus.
He was an exceptionally good newsman. He had the great voice, and he did so well with almost everything. We found him originally doing the gas company commercials, and we said, this guy is so good, let's get him here.
Good evening, Roy Briscoe reporting feature story brought to you by the Pure Oil Company and the Pure Oil Dealers.
And he came with us, and he just did so many things so well. He was very, very good.
I wrote Roy a lot when I was in college about where I should go and what I should do and so forth, and he gave me advice. And then coming back into working beside these guys in Holbrook, who I remember as an Omar weatherman with an Omar bakery suit on, you know, and sitting there hawking bread and cupcakes, you know, and that kind of stuff. And it was really funny, because when I came back, I used to tease him a lot, and Joe would just say, just remember, Dave, I've seen a lot of news anchors come and go.
Though Holbrook, Pepper, and Briscoe were extremely popular, another man would rise to the forefront of Central Ohio newscasters.
This is New Concord, Ohio, hometown of an astronaut.
Chet Long was the senior newscaster. He had such a following that that's all he ever did. He was just a newscaster. He was the #1 on radio, and he came over to television and was #1 right out front always.
The last thing I remember that Chet used to do before he went on the air, he used to put on his aftershave, walk by the newsroom and say goodbye to everybody, and especially the women, and walked out there and did his news show. So everybody knew that Chet had gone by because they smelled his aftershave. Everybody knew that smell.
Through the years, others would sit at the 10 TV news desk. Men like Tom Ryan, Lou Forrest, and current CBS correspondent Bob Orr. Sportscasters like Earl Flora, Marty DeVictor, Ted Mullins, and Lee Velicities. And the original 10 TV weatherman, Bob McMasters. These names have covered the span of 50 years. But there was a time when television news teams reflected the biases that a majority of the American people held. And there were white males, and white males only, behind the news desk. 10 TV Eyewitness News, however, was at the forefront of change.
I was the only African American in the state of Ohio on the air. But not only was that important in terms of the African American community, but not only was I the only African American on the air, there were no women newscasters on the air. There were women who were on the air. They did shows, talk shows. None in the news, though, because it was not expected at that time that women would be appropriate to deliver the news. It was thought that their voice was too high. It's all kinds of baloney, that for the same reason they thought blacks couldn't do it. But, you know, that's changed. And that's kind of growth. That's a kind of growth that has been a positive growth.
One of the most popular female anchors at 10 TV Eyewitness News came to WBNS in the early 80s. Her name was Faith Daniels.
She was an absolute delight. She did the noon news with Roy Briscoe. And we said, you know, there is real talent.
I think she sort of reminded me of a Andrea Camburn. She's that type of person, just bubbly, a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. But she was serious when she was on the air, but she was just a lot of practical jokes and fun. I mean, nothing specific, just a pleasure to work with, just a good person.
While Daniels would move on to the Today Show on NBC, another 10 TV favorite would also move to New York. Dana Tyler now anchors for WCBS.
Dana was a student of the craft. I mean, we'd come in off the road for Heart of Ohio, and we'd come off the hour 5 or 5:30 newscast that we did with her, and we'd head right to the editing booth and look at those shows to see what we did, where we looked stupid, where we were great, where we were bad, what was good, what was bad, what was ugly, and I just really appreciated that in her, the fact that we could just sit there and look at these shows, and then the next show we'd be better.
10 TV Eyewitness News has always been about its people and the people of Central Ohio. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at one of our area's favorite sons, Joe Holbrook. It was the beginning of the television boom. No one quite knew where the new medium would go or how it would get there. But there was a definite buzz about it. And that buzz prompted a career radio man to call 10 TV chief announcer Bill Pepper.
I was in town one time on vacation. I lived in Portsmouth, Ohio, worked at a little radio station there, and called Bill and said, I would really like to see a TV station. He said, are you interested in the job? And I said, sure. He said, come on over. I'm auditioning a couple of guys tomorrow. I auditioned, I got the job. That was in 1950.
Holbrook had landed the job he wanted, though he really didn't know what he was getting into, because he'd never actually seen television.
I'd never seen it at all. In Portsmouth, Ohio, we went out to a picnic one time and they had a TV set up, and it was just full of snow. We could barely see a little image. My wife saw that and she said, you're leaving radio for this? I said, well, I think it's a little bit better than that.
As Holbrook waited for his start date at 10 TV to arrive, he did receive a bit of a scare.
During the summer, I picked up Columbus Dispatch and looked at it, and they had this fantastic guy that they were bringing in from Dayton. And I called Bill Pepper. I said, is that my job? He said, no. He said, your job is safe. He said, it's just another guy that we need. I came up, and that was Jonathan Winters. I had never heard of him. I had no idea what he could do. But of course, he entertained us royally in the hallways. In fact, some of the material was not suitable for broadcast in those days.
After a couple of years of wearing many different hats at the station, including on April Fool's Day, Holbrook was given the opportunity of becoming Bob McMaster's understudy in the weather department. And when McMasters left 10 TV, Holbrook took over as full-time weatherman, a job that he would hold on to for more than 30 years.
I started doing the weather in about 1952. And our only tool in those days was the telephone. We picked up the telephone, called the Weather Bureau, wrote out the lows and the highs and the fronts, and gave the weather. Pretty soon, we got a teletype which had only weather information. People came from all over the station. Oh, look at that. That's it. It's just weather, everything. And then, of course, our tools became more sophisticated over the years. And we were the first to have radar. And the most difficult thing we had to do was to replace the ink pen. And we finally did that satisfactorily. The cardboard cutouts and all those things were not immediate. So we finally were able to replace those with computer graphics. And we were the first station to have computer graphics. We are also the first station to have Doppler radar.
Joe was probably the biggest influence on me, and I say this for a very good reason. You know, one of the things that's the hardest to accept in this business is change. We kind of get in a rut, and those of us on the air like to do things just a certain way. Well, Joe was a little bit older, and of course he was just being bombarded with all of this brand new technology in weather forecasting, from computers and radars and dual Doppler radars. And you know what? Holbrook didn't flinch once when they asked him to change. And I know at least 3 weather guys in the state of Ohio who said, well, let's bring in people with computers and producers to produce my weather forecast. I'm not going to do that. Joe Holbrook did not. Joe learned all that new technology. He learned all the computers. And it really taught me a lesson that, you know, if I was going to survive in this situation, I was going to have to learn to change with everything as well.
I remember watching Joe Holbrook do the weather. And I just thought, when I'm a little girl now, right, and then ultimately a teenager and all that, but I just thought he was so cute. I thought he was just the sharpest old man I'd ever seen. Coming over here and actually meeting and talking to Joe Holbrook was a real kick for me. And I don't think I've ever told Joe this, but there was just always this little secret fantasy that one day I would be a weather girl, like, and work with Joe Holbrook. He could show me how to put the sun up on the map and tell me what a jet stream was.
Well, it's really nice to join you inside. We were glad to have you all the times that we had you outside. That was neat, wasn't it?
That's great, except there is one problem.
What's that, Joe?
You're sitting on my barometer.
Joe was really a neat guy. Joe was, he was a quintessential weather guy here that just, he was always, everybody looked up to Joe Holbrook. He was very believable. He was sort of like a Walter Cronkite of the weather here at Channel 10.
In 1992, Holbrook finally retired from 10 TV.
That's right.
But he remains one of the most popular personalities to ever be a part of the WBNS family. When we come back, some other members of the 10 TV family on what WBNS and Central Ohio mean to one another. To gain an understanding of a workplace, you need to talk to the workers. And when you talk to the people of 10 TV, current or former, about what WBNS and local television are all about, a common feeling prevails.
Television stations do news, and I think that all of our competitors do news, and we all try to be the best that we can be. I think that we all do that very well. But I think certainly what sets us apart is the commitment to the community to get involved with issues and activities and programs that give back to the community, not just tell the stories of the things that are happening out there, but be a part of the solution to make this place a better place, and to just celebrate what Central Ohio is all about, and that is community, that is family. It's the biggest part of my job.
This is such a special kind of job. You have an obligation to be involved with people, to be involved in a community, to give something back, because this is special. This is, I don't want to say magical, but something about what you can do in television that you can't do in very many other mediums. Television is a very intimate relationship with people. You're in their homes. You're with them when they wake up. You're with them in the afternoon. I still go out and meet people who say, I've always watched Channel 10, and they'd be 50, 60 years old. I grew up on it. I've been in the market on television about 20 years now, and kids tell me, I grew up watching you. Makes me feel old, but in another way, it makes me feel very good.
The Channel 10 operation has done more in this community for the benefit of the community than any other station. And we were everywhere. We were everywhere. Every time there was a cause to be promoted, the Red Cross, you name it, cancer, you know, and so forth, and we'd go out on fundraisers and stuff. This television operation is very community involved.
There's a tremendous amount of pride that we as 10 TV have this bond with the community. I mean, that we are looked at as locally owned, that we are looked at as being the station that is community oriented.
At one time when the schools were closed because of the weather, we stripped out everything we did from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon and taught school. That's the kind of station this is.
The biggest thing here is pride, and that means a lot to a lot of people. And I think it shows, I really do. I think it shows in how we do things, when we do things, how we achieve things. And it's been a good run. I don't see myself ever at any other station, never.
And we were all friends. We all did things such as we had a softball team, we had a basketball team, and that kind of thing too. And it was sort of like family. In fact, it was family.
Every once in a while I have to pinch myself when I realize where I came from and where I am now. Growing up on the Near East Side, not having a lot, but growing up with 10 TV. 10 TV has always been part of my life. I've always watched 10 TV, related to 10 TV. And to actually be sitting on the anchor desk here, to actually be a part of the 10 TV team, to be a part of this incredible, historic operation, I still sometimes have to pinch myself and wonder how I got from there to here. But then I also take time to be very, very thankful that I made that trip and that this is where I am.
If you can get into WBNS TV, that's where you want to be.
It's like a family. Always has been. Hopefully it always will be.
If we look back over the last 50 years that WBNS has been on the air, it's about our people and our programming, utilizing leading edge technology to bring the best in broadcast journalism to Central Ohio. It's certainly our family's commitment and expectation to continue that commitment. And we hope that the next 50 years will see the same progress in our involvement in the city and in broadcast journalism that we've been privileged to enjoy in the last 50 years.
When we come back, a final look at the last 50 years.
It's been a family tradition for 50 years, a bond between 10 TV and our community. And we owe all of that to you. Hello, I'm Jerry Ravish. Here at WBNS 10 TV, we take a lot of pride in the fact that the people of Central Ohio turn to us for their news. And with that pride also comes a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibility. So even on a night like tonight, when we look back at the faces and stories and shows of the past, we still try to keep one eye on the future. Whether it's a technological advancement like high-definition television, or a new way of gathering and sharing news like the Ohio News Network, our goal is to always give you the best that we possibly can. For the people you've seen and heard tonight, and for all of those people who've ever worked in front of or behind the cameras here at 10 TV, thank you for making us part of your family. Good night.
Now. Now?
Go, now.
Cue.
Now.
We're rolling.
This is Newsbreak.
Hello, I'm Bob Moore.
And I'm Carol Costello. At a late...
Listen.
Joe Holbrook had a long, serious talk with his computer. Oh, no, I didn't, Lou. I kicked it.
We had a thing called kitchen fair.
That's not a good thing to tell you.
A woman came out of WOR named Jean Fair, P-H-A-I-R, and they call it Kitchen Fair. Clever.
And we had a kitchen out there, rigged up. I mean, you know, gas stove, the whole 9 yards.
Gas utilities. Okay, sponsored it. And she always preached, be careful. Be careful as you use something.
She was going to bake something.
And she always had this big kitchen match when she lighted the oven, and she would go, and there'd be blooming there, and then she'd lean down, and she'd get talking once in a while.
So she went, and she thought she lit the oven. Closed the door, but she didn't light the oven. The gas was going. And so she goes over to the oven when the time comes, and she says, oh my. She looks at it, she says, it didn't light, you know, like this. She takes a match, boom. Well, it lit.
And my God, we thought the whole place burned up. And she came out of there almost comedically.
Singed her eyebrows and singed her, and she went, oh my.
And her face was all black, and her eyes were, you know, she had glasses, so those were white. And her hair was singed, and she looked back at the camera and she says, no, I want you never to do anything like that. Would you please go to a commercial?
She kind of walked off the set. I don't know what happened.
And she went, boom, passed out.
I'm laughing because she didn't get hurt badly. She just singed her eyebrows and things. Oh, it didn't light, you know. Boom. Gas company wasn't too happy about that. That was live.
The swollen Scioto River and creeks like the Pee-Pee are giving...
Well, probably my Hall of Fame moment was my first live shot. I was standing in front of this burning house, and I had the microphone in front of me, and I had just sort of finished telling what had happened there. I thought I had all my facts straight, and I had a great beginning, a middle, and an end to my story, and I was getting ready to tag out the story. Jerry Revish arrived with the Lapid Cam.
Wilson is in Whitehall with the man who can answer those questions, heating contractor Ed Rickles. Stu?
Thanks, Dave. We are here in Whitehall, as you said, and we're with Ed Rickles.
And I couldn't even correct it, so I just let it go. So I come back to the newsroom, and I'm hearing all this laughing, you know, just people just laughing and laughing. And they're over in an edit booth, and they're playing back this tape of mine, live with the Lapid Cam, and they're just falling out laughing.
We'll be back in a moment. And that moment's up.
From 10 TV Eyewitness News, this is Newsbreak.
I can't do this. She finally got me.
Love you, keep smiling, and don't fight.